The assembly should be done only by an authorized garage. We do not assume liability for improper assembly. Please ensure a safe stand of the motorcycle with the assistance of a lifting ramp and secure the frame with an appropriate lifter. Disassemble the strut off your bike. Remove all necessary screws and clamping pieces. We recommend the Müller shock absorber assembly tool. Depending on the strut, the actual installation is as described below. Let's begin with type MP1. Fasten the shock absorber into the shock absorber tool and make sure that it is held strongly within the device. Cock the shock absorber until you reach the hexagon nut of the lowering eye. Heat up the lowering eye with a hot air gun and loosen the counter nut. Remove the lowering eye, the hexagon nut, the disc, and the rubber limiter. The rubber limiter needs to be shortened by approximately 7 to 8 millimeters. Those components are no longer used. Of course, you can keep them in case you want to change back your shock absorber. Put the rubber limiter back onto the shock absorber rod. Attention, now the actual height will be adjusted. The height of the chassis is adjusted with the spring washer. For maximum lowering, which is 35 millimeters, the spring washer needs to be rotated onto the shock absorber rod and afterwards turned back by one complete rotation. It is also possible to lower down to 40 plus millimeters for show purposes only. The spring washer needs to be rotated onto the shock absorber rod to the limit stop. If you don't want it that low, the following rule needs to be considered. The rear end is raised by approximately 3 millimeters when the spring washer is rotated backwards one whole turn. This way, you can easily calculate the desired lowering. Now, screw the thread adapter with the 2 drill holes facing towards the spring washer onto the thread bar and tighten it with the spring washer. Take the new lowering eye and screw it onto the thread adapter to the limit stop and tighten it with the lowering eye and the spring washer. Now let's look at the type MP2. The first steps of the assembly are identical to type MP1. After the rubber limiter has been shortened, you can install the lowering kit. Screw the spring compressor onto the spring washer and make sure the crank faces toward the tongue. With the spring washer, you can adjust the height of the chassis, identical to type MP1. The height of the chassis is adjusted with the spring washer. For maximum lowering, which is 35 millimeters, the spring washer needs to be rotated onto the shock absorber rod and afterwards turned back by one complete rotation. If you don't want it that low, the following rule needs to be considered. The rear end is raised by approximately 3 millimeters when the spring washer is rotated backwards one whole turn. Once you have adjusted the desired height, tighten the thread adapter to the spring washer. Please make sure that the 2 drill holes are facing towards the spring washer. Then you screw the new lowering eye in order to tighten it with the spring washer. In order to adjust the resistance of your chassis, use a hook wrench and tighten the spring by using a spring compressor. The resistance can be adjusted anytime retrospectively. Now you can remove the shock absorber from the assembly tool and put it back into the bike. Now fasten the absorber with the appropriate screws. Attention! We recommend checking the height of the chassis before the screws and clamping pieces are put back into place. If the desired lowering is not enough or the rear end is too low, the absorber needs to be removed again and the adjustment of the height needs to be repeated with the spring washer. If you are happy with the height, you can assemble everything back together. Have fun with your new lowering kit and have a good ride.